Welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Fran, and today I would like to talk about how quantum mechanics and its weirdness underlie every single phenomenon in this apparently predictable cause and effect everyday reality. The 3D, as we like to call it in manifestational law of assumption terms. From the behavior of animals to the growth of plants and photosynthesis to quote-unquote random genetic mutations, everything is possible and explainable only if we use quantum mechanical principles. Classical science cannot account for such phenomena. As we know, some birds, such as robins, for example, migrate to find mild climates. And then they find a way back to the same exact spot they left year after year after year, sometimes even using the exact same nest. But how exactly do they do it? It appears that they do it by tuning in to the Earth magnetic field. Now, the Earth magnetic field is so weak that it couldn't be possibly be perceived by a living creature. Definitely human beings can't perceive the Earth magnetic field. Our senses could not possibly do that, not according to classical mechanics. Experiments in the lab, however, have shown that robins and other migrating birds can indeed detect changes in the Earth magnetic field, and that is their compass when navigating the globe. It appears that light entering the robin's eye causes a cascade of chemicals in the brain. Now, chemicals are made of molecules and subatomic particles. So common sense here must be abandoned. Quantum physics takes over. The robin's magnetic compass is activated by these chemicals. Going one way would activate or set off a specific set of chemicals being released in the brain, and going the other activates a different set of chemicals. As we know from quantum physics, subatomic particles, which were produced together or underwent a certain process, for instance, a photon which splits in two different photons due to polarization. An example, when it's going through polarized lens. And what happens to these quantum particles after they've been created together, or they were one and then split into two, they become entangled. Now, entanglement says that these split particles can communicate instantaneously across space, even if they are galaxies apart. Now, what happens? How does quantum entanglement apply to birds' migration? So the same thing, this entanglement goes on inside the bird's eye. When photons enter the robin's eye, they excite a protein called cryptochrome or CRY4. The energy within the photon is disturbing the electrons in the protein molecules, knocking one electron out of one molecule and into another. This creates a so-called radical pair. A radical pair of molecules. Radical pairs are, in other words, entangled molecules. This means that even when physically separated, they are synchronized with each other. After a radical pair is created in a single state, internal magnetic fields can be influenced by external magnetic fields. This quantum dance of electrons inside the migrating bird's eye is, in other words, responsible for their magnetic compass, which responds to stimuli 1,000,000 times weaker than it would normally do. Eventually, the two molecules will recover and settle back into their original state, but until they do, the pair remain entangled. The amount of time the molecules spent in one state versus the other helps the bird navigate the globe. One of the states produces a chemical which is released in the bird's brain. This chemical relays information to the bird about the Earth magnetic field. Since the magnetic field is stronger at the poles and weaker at the equator, the bird will use this information to navigate the globe and go back to where it came from or migrate to milder climates. Now, another spooky example of how reality is not what it seems, but it's a lot stranger, is our sense of smell. According to classical physics, different chemicals have differently shaped molecules. And these molecules are attached to specific receptors in our brain, like a lock and key type mechanism. When they do, they trigger a specific reaction, and this is how we recognize different smells. But this classical explanation has always had a problem. You see, different chemicals may have very similar smells, which we cannot tell apart, but which are completely different in shape. For instance, cyanide smells of almonds, but obviously they are very different chemicals. One is a poison and another one is a nut. So this can't be the whole explanation. This can't be the whole story. Quantum biology has the key. It says that our noses are not smelling these molecules, they are listening to them. In other words, different chemical molecules have a different frequency. As electrons leap from one atom to another in the receptor site, they vibrate the scent molecule, like my fingers would while plucking a guitar. It appears that the wave-particle duality applies to our sense of smell too. Now, for more information on the wave-particle duality, you can click on the link below in the description box in which I explain exactly what that means. Now, our sense of smell seems to work like our sense of hearing and sight. Our organs detect wave frequencies and then translate these frequencies into images, sounds, and smells. Now, how does the wave-particle duality applies here? Now, first, the molecule/particle of the chemical fits into its specific receptor. Then, on a second, afterwards, the vibrations take over and our noses listen to the frequency of the molecule. It's a completely quantum phenomenon. But even stranger yet is the phenomenon of metamorphosis. Let's take, for example, tadpoles. In the matter of weeks, they break down and reassemble in the form of frogs. Tails are reabsorbed by their body. But the mystery is, how does it happen so fast? Classical physics does not have a plausible explanation for it. Quantum physics does, and it's quantum tunneling. To understand quantum tunneling, imagine a tennis ball going through a brick wall, or rather disappearing on this side of the wall and reappearing on the opposite side. The term tunneling is deceptive here, as it suggests that the same particle is going through a tunnel in the wall, when in actual fact, quantum particles go from A to B without crossing the space in between. In actual fact, we cannot even be sure that the particle disappearing at A and reappearing at B is the same particle at all, as all electrons or all photons, say, look the same. But let's go back to the tadpole metamorphosis. The molecules that make up the tail break down and reassemble into the frog's limbs in a matter of weeks. For this to happen, trillions of chemical reactions need to take place. Chemical bonds need to be undone and reformed. This happens via enzymes, which accelerate chemical reactions by enormous amounts, like a trillion times faster than they normally would. In the tail of the tadpole, collagen keeps its structure together. In metamorphosis, a collagen enzyme breaks the collagen down at incredible speed. To untie the knots within the protons, enzymes need to overcome an energy barrier, and this takes time. This process is much too slow to break down a tadpole's tail. The only way to explain the process is through quantum tunneling. Protons turn into ghosts. They disappear on this side of the energy barrier and reappear on the other side. What would be considered an impenetrable barrier in our 3D wall, like a brick wall, they go straight through this wall. Or in other words, these appear on this side and reappear on the opposite side without crossing a space in between. In nuclear physics, this is how radioactive decay takes place. The sun wouldn't shine without this process. At the nuclear level, at the quantum level, time and space disappear. Common sense does not apply at this level. Electrons and enzymes are not physical particles in space-time. Rather, they are fuzzy spread out waves of probabilities. And this is what allows tadpoles to turn into frogs. Quantum tunneling turns strong links between molecules into weak ones so that the entire collagen scaffolding breaks apart and reforms in the shape of a frog, limbs and body. It sounds like a magic trick, doesn't it? But this is not all. Photosynthesis also happens according to quantum processes. Photosynthesis, the conversion of air and sunlight into plants. According to classical physics, this is how photosynthesis works. When a photon hits the living cell, it knocks an electron from the chlorophyll molecule. This creates a tiny packet of energy called an exciton. This exciton then bounces its way through a forest of chlorophyll molecules until it reaches the so-called reaction center, where photosynthesis takes place. The problem with this explanation is that it cannot account for how the exciton finds its way to the reaction center. You see, according to classical physics, the exciton needs to pass through every single part of the cell before it reaches the exciton by chance. But this would use up too much energy and it would take too long. Once it reaches the reaction center of the molecule, it would have lost its energy and it would have been useless. But in reality, it's not useless. So what gives? What has been observed in the lab is that the exciton travels all possible paths at once by behaving like a GPS satellite, smearing itself out like a wave of possibilities and then taking the shortest pathway to the reaction center, then reappearing there as a particle and giving up its ghost identity. Now, if you wanted to use the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics, we would say that the exciton takes information from infinite parallel realities in which it travels in all directions, then selects the quickest path to the reaction center. In a way, you could say that the exciton is living in the end. And when it's spread out like a wave, because it's fuzzy and non-material like a particle, untangible or intangible like a particle, in a way, a part of it's already at its destination. The shocking part about this is that there seems to be some sort of consciousness of the particle. If the exciton were to go everywhere at random, then eventually it would hit the reaction center in the molecule by chance. But if it's traveling all paths at once and then selecting the shortest path to its destination, then there seems to be some sort of guiding consciousness or volition on the part of the exciton. Just like if you were a pilot, you would select a destination on your autopilot program and program your journey. Or if you were a driver, you would select a destination on your GPS. But how does the exciton know what destination to select? It's a bit like the double slit experiment. And again, for this double slit experiment explanation, click on the link below in the description box. When a particle knows that it's being observed and it goes through one of the detectors at once, at random, yet when unobserved or undisturbed by photons, it remains spread out like a wave of probabilities and it's everywhere at once. Now, the common denominator here appears to be that photons interacting with the probability wave are affecting, or in other words, light and observation are affecting how the particle acts, or whether it's a particle or a wave. In the case of photosynthesis, like in the photoelectric effect for which Einstein was awarded the Nobel Prize, photons of a certain frequency are able to knock out an electron out of a molecule. They, in other words, disturb the spread out wave and collapse it into a particle by changing its frequency. Only photons of a certain frequency can disturb the energy of a particle by knocking an electron off a metal plate, for instance. So it is this frequency of vibration which allows to collapse waves of possibilities or fuzzy states into tangible particles. Does this begin to sound like a law of attraction or law of assumption type affirmation? When we live in the end by vibrating at that frequency, we are able to collapse that particular reality. You're like the exciton which travels all possible paths at once to get to that specific destination in the quickest way possible. How you achieve a specific frequency is through thoughts. Thoughts elicit emotions, and emotions cause a chemical reaction within a brain which switches on our chemical compass. Like the robin which navigates to its final destination by detecting the frequency of the Earth's magnetic field, or like the exciton which finds its reaction center by navigating all possible routes at once, and then selecting the easiest, shortest, quickest way to its destination. Our emotions too allow us to navigate to our desired destination by knowing what that frequency feels like and then reproducing it in our brain. The chemical reaction produced by our thoughts and emotions is our magnetic compass, our GPS, our very own reactions to our very own reaction center where light turns into life, where thought and imagination collapses the wave function of infinite possibilities into a tangible reality in space-time. Quantum physics is at the core of life. It may challenge our common sense and appear nonsensical and magical, but this is how life works, at the core. Phenomena such as metamorphosis, photosynthesis, and migration have clearly shown that our 3D reality is merely the tip of the iceberg. What we perceive with our five senses appears real and stable and tangible, but it's the product of weird quantum phenomena such as spooky action at a distance, entanglement, particles crossing impossible distances, electrons popping in and out of existence without crossing the space in between, going from A to B, particles crossing energy barriers by doing this, by quantum tunneling. Light from the sun wouldn't be able to reach the Earth without quantum tunneling. Knowing exactly how to reach the reaction center inside molecules in the fastest, most efficient way possible. How do these molecules know, A, when they're being observed, B, where to go? They seem to have a consciousness. Now, as weird as this sounds, you have to be like that molecule/wave. You have to, when it comes to reality, what we see is not what we get, but we get what we see, pardon the pun. So you have to see it first. when you see it in your mind's eye, you produce a chemical reaction which vibrates at a certain frequency. And when you vibrate at that frequency, you basically select the reality you are already experiencing in your brain, tuning into that frequency and then reproducing it, collapsing it in your 3D reality. What we usually do is the exact opposite, as in the sense of smell. We detect a certain frequency with our nose. This produces a cascade of chemicals in our brain which activate memories. And certain smells can give us a specific emotion depending on what that smell is being linked to, what memory has been linked to over the years. The same process can be reversed, however. We can access memories willingly through our thoughts, which will produce certain chemicals in our brain and set us on the frequency or get us on the frequency of our desired destination. We can set our magnetic compass to lead us to our desired destination in the quickest, most efficient, shortest way possible, by using the frequency of our thoughts and emotions to guide us like a GPS. So this is it for today. I intend that this audio helps you to understand how your thoughts can help you shift your frequency and set you on the path that you desire. Instead of letting automatic thought processes and fears set your GPS, you can set your destination by choosing the type of chemicals that you would like to reproduce, the type of frequency that you would like to experience. I hope this podcast helps you to make sense of how, when you live from the end of your desire, you become spread out like a wave, so that part of your consciousness is already there at your final destination, at your desired destination, and it's guiding you towards your goal in the shortest, quickest possible way. You may not be able to know which route you will take in advance, as you're taking all routes at once. You just have to trust that your autopilot, your magnetic compass, your GPS is taking you there. If you've come this far and found this content interesting or helpful, please remember to share, like, subscribe, and hit the bell option so you can be notified of my future videos. In any case, thank you for listening. Have a wonderful awakened life.